want, like, you don't, yeah. Hey.
I'll do whatever I want on this show.
Yeah.
What's up, guys? I was telling Ryan I'm practicing for when I have to do a Zoom call with all the old people in my HOA. They'll be like this when we're on the Zoom call.
Did you have laser eye surgery?
Computer. Huh?
Did you have laser eye surgery?
I did, yeah. So these are just
so that it looks extra blurry then, right? Oh, there's just no lens.
Yeah. The Korean style way. Or the other guy in the HOA that's like this. Computer.
And you can see the fingers typing.
And it looks like he's got like Vaseline smeared across the camera.
That's the old school Zachary Aurelius look.
Yeah, I'm bringing it back for today. What's up? Hey, I wanted to ask you too, first and foremost, is this the first interview that you've done since
Yes, man. GBWC? Yeah, man. First interview.
All right, good.
Yeah. All exclusive rights go to you, man.
I know. I was about to say, like, you better not have been like on somewhere else. You've been all over town before coming home to this channel.
No, man. No, man. It was just like 2 weeks ago.
Have other people asked you?
Some people have asked, like, leading, like, actually even before the competition, right? Some people were like, oh, after the competition, can you know, but no, like, not, nobody's really asked formally afterwards, but every now and then people are like, oh, you love, it's okay, that's okay. I'm just a Gunpla enthusiast. I'm just an enthusiast, man.
That's true. That is true. I mean,
I'm not. Yeah.
We'll get into it. I mean, like, there's not only, I mean, I think anybody who knows, I guess, is like familiar with you knows that. I mean, like, there's some people that don't have much of like an online presence, that are in GBWC. So like, if you wanted to interview, I don't know who would be a good example. But anyway, someone who just like isn't ever like online in videos, even like this. But I mean, if people know about you, they know that like at least you appear like on this channel from time to time. I know you've been interviewed on other channels before too. So I mean, like, people know that like you're open to doing it. And so you would think that they might want to ask you. But anyway, hey, maybe it'll be coming. I saw that what's that woman on Instagram that does, she had like a cool post about your thing. Orc hobby, right?
Yes. A savage orc guy, and her YouTube is rogue hobbies. That was really cool. Like, it was really neat to see, kind of like, because she has extensive experience in like the Warhammer, Golden Demon Awards and stuff. So that was kind of a neat a viewpoint, right, from her. So that was kind of cool to see.
He someone else, actually, I wasn't aware of her like YouTube channel or Instagram or anything, whatever, but someone else recommended. They're like, hey, there's this person who's like in like wargaming, but has recently been trying out Gunpla. You should see if you can get her on to interview her. And I reached out to her and I hadn't heard anything back. So if you talk to her, let her know that I wanted to interview her about her experiences on this channel. I figured that when I saw, I haven't seen,
I'll message her because she,
Did she get in touch with you?
Yeah, she like messaged me at first. She was like, oh, congrats on the win, and I would just, I replied and because I think she goes by her actual name on Instagram or something like that. So I actually didn't know it was her. And then afterwards, she's like, oh, I'm thinking of making a video just reviewing GBWC, and like, is it okay if I use like your picture? And I'm like, oh, for sure, like, like everything is broadcasted, and so that's how we started talking, and but she's really nice. She's really like, she really does her research, right? Like, I was pretty impressed by a lot of the things she like researched and looked into. And so it's cool. I'll message her and I'll let you know.
I wonder if that's like a
Zach wants
No, just it was a good
Yeah.
recommendation. Just I thought it'd be interesting to get her perspective. Yeah, someone
Mhm.
recommended me to look into her about. Anyway, talking about
Yeah.
you. Aside from that,
Yeah.
the other reason why I expected like people want to be reaching out to you is because like number one, it's like back to back. Simon won last year. This year, you got second
Oh,
place. So
yeah, yeah,
Canada's
yeah.
been representing,
Yeah.
and
Oh.
yeah, aside from I think aside from Simon last year, it's just only the second time when someone from a Western country has placed in the top three, right? I'm just trying to think.
Yeah, I think so.
Uh, before
Italy
that,
ever place top 3? I don't know. I don't know.
I don't
I don't think so.
believe so. Yeah, I would have to go back and check. Anyway,
Maybe
I
it
was thinking
came
about that
4th.
lately, and
Yeah.
I couldn't remember. It's on a
Aw,
different live stream, I think it was
I
recently,
know.
where I was like pondering that. Oh yeah. Hmm.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's
We're
cool.
very fortunate to have Simon from Canada. He's kinda like our local guru.
Mm.
We
Yeah,
yeah.
for
We
sure.
have, like, a chat group going on, and we always, like, bounce ideas or ask
Mm,
questions on things, and so, yeah, no,
nice.
it's a cool bunch up here, so, yeah.
Is he in the same area as you that like you guys run into each other if you ever were to attend like local meetup stuff, something like that?
Yeah, he
Nice.
lives, like, all the way across Canada from me.
Mm,
Um, actually,
mm,
most of the, like, really, like, more intense modelers live kind of on the west side of Canada kinda thing, like,
mm,
West Central,
mm,
and then whereas
mm,
I'm or sorry, the East Central, sorry, in Toronto area, and then
mm,
whereas I'm more, like, in the Central Canada, and then there's another
mm,
big group in the Western Canada as well too, so I'm
mm.
kinda, like, in the middle. But we have like, locally, we have some pretty talented modelers as well too, which I'm really good friends with, right?
Nice.
And
Mm.
but yeah, I've actually never met Simon in person before.
Wow.
One time we came close. Yeah, one time we came close, but we always chat in our group. Like we have
Mm,
a chat group going on Facebook, so
sure.
that's always going live. So yeah, yeah,
Mm,
yeah, yeah. I think we have a really good camaraderie here. So yeah.
mm. Well, hey, maybe you guys maybe you'll get lucky and you'll become the 51st state and then you just all be in the same state. You won't even have you won't have west, central,
Yeah,
east side. It'll just be
that's
all
right. One.
in the same state.
I
You
know
know,
it's kind of crazy what's going on now, but yes,
not that
we
big of a
won't go into
country. I mean,
politics, right?
just make it
uh,
one massive state.
yeah,
I
yeah,
think. I mean, it would be. I mean, I don't know. Even if that were to happen, I mean, why would it be one state? I think it would need to be broken up a
yeah,
little bit. It wouldn't
yeah,
make any
yeah,
sense. Maybe like
yeah.
the 51st, second, third, fourth, and fifth states or something. But anyway, yeah, it's stupid.
Yeah,
All
that
right,
would be
let's talk some more about GBWC. So yeah.
yeah.
Oh, on another note, so
Yes.
typically, if anybody's tuning in and has not seen the past couple of months, Ryan and I have done a couple episodes of Plamo Trend here, which
Mm,
there's been recently some really cool trends that I want to talk about with you. So we'll have to
mm,
do another episode uh,
yes, for sure.
soon. But for today, obviously, because of GBWC recently happening with you, is why we're doing this instead.
Mhm.
But for those of you guys who are Plamo No Trend fans, stay tuned because I
Yes.
got some cool ones for us to go through later. But
Yeah.
yeah, what actually it would have been cool to talk more about it kind of like ahead of time, but it just kind of like crept up on us. But and I guess going into GBWC, and one thing I want to talk about too is just kind of talk more in detail about the build itself. But I'm like,
Mm,
just to kind of skip ahead to one of the questions that I was most excited to ask you about was like, once you are there and,
yeah.
once you get everything set up and you're able to like look around all the other entries really closely, how did
Mhm.
you feel about your chances like when you sat down for like the ceremony, when it's time that I'm just about to announce it? Did you think that like, did you expect like, I think I might have a good chance, or were you like, no way? Or what?
That's a really good question, Zach.
Yeah.
And actually, I've been telling a lot of people because a lot of my friends here who aren't really
Mm,
into the hobby, right?
mm,
Actually, like all my friends really here, except for maybe a couple few, aren't really into the hobby. And so a lot of them, when they first looked at my entry, like even without looking at other people's entries, they're like, "Oh, Ryan, you got it in the bag. Like you're gonna win a medal for sure." Like they were like, "Oh, you're gonna bring home something, right?" But it was really funny because like even before the competition, like looking at all the entries, um, immediately like I knew that China was really strong this year. Like I knew China for sure would place top 3, right? This is just me before even seeing the entries in person, right? And maybe there were another like 2 entries that really stood out to me just from looking at pictures. But it's funny you asked that, hey, because like when after I set up everything, right? The way it worked, it was kind of interesting because like I think there were like 3 buses that sent us, and I think they staggered the entries. So there was a group of them who already started like assembling their entries, right? And so when I was in the second bus, I think, right? And so when I came, some entries were already set up, right? And so immediately in the back of my mind, I was like, oh crap, I better like start getting into it kind of thing, right? And because I was like, oh, we're given like a finite amount of time. I don't want to like run out of time, right? In the end, we had tons of time, right? And in fact, I think it was the Hong Kong winner who's like, oh wow, because they gave us these really narrow tables too to like set up. It's fine, at least it's a table, right? It was funny because I remember the Hong Kong winner. He was like, "Oh wow, like there's no space on the table because like all the entries were like pretty big, right?" And then so he's like, "Well, I'm just gonna go out for a smoke and I'll come back when there's more room," kind of thing, right? So then I was like, "Oh okay, wow," like that was kind of the mentality when we first went, right? But anyways, after we set up and everything, that was the biggest difference this year compared to like in 2018 when I went. Was like I feel like immediately after we set up, we maybe had only like 15 minutes to like walk around. That's depending if you set up like quick enough too, right? Because I feel like they were ushering people who were like, "Oh, are you done setting up? Okay, well we're gonna head up to the lounge for lunch now, right?" And then so part of me was like, "Wait, I want to like see everyone's
Look
stuff,
around.
right?" Yeah,
Yeah.
right. Because like it felt like immediately they're like, "Okay, who's done setting up? Okay, you're done. Okay, you follow this person. We're gonna bring you up for lunch, right?" And so whereas in 2018, I remember they gave us like the full like 2 hours, and it was only after those full 2 hours when they were like, okay, everyone's gonna go for lunch now. So we had a lot more like downtime, I feel, and like we were able to just like chat and like hang out a bit more. But fortunately, like setting up the entry, like everything went really smoothly. But it was funny because like obviously I would walk around. I wanted to take some pictures of like other people as they're setting up as well too. I wish I got more shots, but again, like they were kind of like ushering us out, right? And when I saw other people's entries, I had like it, immediately I was like, oh man, like I can see at least 4 to 5 entries that are super impressive, right? Oh yeah. Here's the photo. Hey, thanks for
Yeah, I'll
sharing.
put up. I figure I can put up. You sent me a bunch of photos, so I'll
Yeah,
kind of
no,
I'll
that's great.
illustrate your story here for you. Go
Exactly. Oh,
cool
thanks,
photos.
man. That's so good. Yeah. See,
Yeah.
so for example, Jim Ren, right, from Thailand, right? He is like a true master of this craft. Like when I was watching him kind of set up his piece, right? Again, it was nearing the end, but he was like looking at everything from different angles. He was like tweaking like literally like millimeters of the pose, right? And he was looking at all different angles. Like I was really, and he like he put on his glasses to like see things with more detail, and I just love that moment because it felt like he was just in the zone, right? Like just making sure everything's looking perfect. And I remember there was one point where I should have sent you some other photos because it was actually really funny. Like I have this other photo of like Dan behind, and he's just kind of like doing a look where it's like look at this guy, like that's amazing, right? It's like really, and I just loved that focus that he had, and it was like one of those points where he just like some artists, they stand back and look at their art, and then they're like, okay, it's ready, and then that's when he like brought it into the case, right? And so his was one of the entries where I was really blown away from, and and I was really, really impressed not only by like the craftsmanship in a lot of the entries, but also like their presence. Like I feel like they filled up the space in the cabinet really, really well, and it just had a really good not only like I'm not trying to say like bigger is better and bigger is gonna win you stuff, right? But like it was very visually impressive. Like specifically China's entry was obviously really impressive. Like it was actually even more impressive in person than it was in the pictures, right? And I really, really liked. Oh, this is Thailand's, or sorry, not Thailand. This is Indonesia's entry with the Nightingale,
Yeah.
and like that one was probably the biggest entry there. Like it was probably like maximized all the dimensions. But even watching him put like all the components in, I was like in awe, right? Like, and when you look close up, like the paintwork was just flawless, right? And so his was another one of the entries where I was like, oh man, like this is going to be top 3 for sure, right? And in fact, Indonesia. So Andy from Indonesia, that was the one that we were just seeing before, and then this one, the Japanese one, the third place. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the Indonesia. Sorry, and
which one you want to see? This one?
yeah. Sorry. Yeah, sorry. With the this is Andy's entry for art. Um, it's so nice because like a lot of times, like I love the paintwork that he did. I mean, I can go into explaining each single entry later on, but like this one was very visually impressive, right? And like and the paintwork was just really beautiful, like where he put like that kind of that purplish bluish kind of you know, almost like a crab like, or like a, you know, like an organic paint texture to it.
It's like a marble finish, really sort of, right?
Yeah, that's right. Marble. That's right. Yeah, thanks. And then I thought that complemented like the gold that he used with the white, like just all the colors just worked really well. And yeah, and I mean, I know some people like they could get lost in everything, but for me, I thought that was a really, really impressive entry, right? Yeah, this is Hong Kong's entry, right? So in general, like I was actually really like looking up close, I was like, wow, these entries are really beautiful. And so at the end, like Indonesia and Thailand, like the one with the dragon coming, the white Sinanju, and then also the one we were just looking at, right? Those ones actually came in, yeah, like that's very like the pose is so dynamic, right? The dragon busting out of the roof is like really, really beautifully done, right? It just, you know, shows a really good silhouette, has a really good silhouette, and like a really dynamic piece, right? And so they ended up coming in tying for 4th place, actually. Like it was incredibly close. Like all the scores from the 4th place to the 1st place, the 4th place was like 70 out of 90, right? And then they both tied, like the Indonesia and Thailand, right? And then the 3rd place was 71, right? That's Japan, right? And then the 2nd place was mine, which was 72, right? So like, and then the China winner won by 2, so he was 74. So like I feel like all top the 4 of us were all like really, really close in terms of the marking, right? And yeah, like even this Japanese one, like it was you know, it was like again, the pose is really, really nice in this one, right? The midnight butterfly thing was a kind of a cool addition. I know like some mention, oh, you know, it looks a little bit too busy or, you know, put together like Transformers like, but I feel like you still get a really good view of like the turn X kind of, you know, like, you know, immediately when you look at it, it's a turn X, right? Like, and so I feel like in that respect, it doesn't really lose you too much, right? But yeah, like, I mean, yeah, I think in general, like I had a massive imposter effect, like effect there. Like going there, I was like, I don't belong here. Like mine is just like a single RX-78 that's like been seen so much, right? And like there's all these like beautiful interpretations, and so I mean, like, you know, yeah, yeah, but yeah. So I mean, nonetheless, like I mean, with that said, I mean, I was pretty surprised with my results. So yeah.
So you were not, when you sat down for the ceremony to start, you weren't expecting that you were going to be one of the finalists.
Yeah.
Is that right?
In fact, Zach, it was really funny, right? Because like they do like you remember attending it, but they do like a dry run rehearsal kind of thing, and then they're telling people like, oh, okay, so we're gonna announce like people here. Like I remember the person hosting it was like, okay, guys, like the 3rd, 2nd, and 1st place, after you receive your trophy, we're gonna ask you to like say something, right? And then so they're telling us, they're like, So make sure you think of something to say in case you win. I specifically remember when he said that, I was like, I'm not gonna think of anything. Like, in fact, I was like talking with like Australia and whatever, and then we're like, oh, who do you think is gonna be top 3? Like, we were talking more about who you think is gonna be top 3 than like me thinking, okay, if I win, I'm gonna say this, this, and this, right? And I even remember like when they were announcing the 3rd place winner, they were like, okay, 3rd place is like Japan, right? And like, you know how normally when you're like getting ready to go up, right? If you're anticipating yourself to go up, you'd be kind of like sitting in like a higher up position, more ready position.
Yeah.
I was totally like laying back with my legs crossed kind of thing. And I was like, oh, Japan is really good, right? And so when they're like, oh, in 2nd place, I was like, oh, I wonder who 2nd place is gonna be. Like they're like drummer. I was like, Ryan Lau. I was like, oh, what? Like I was like, oh, what? Oh, this is crazy. Like I was like straightening up my shirt, like getting ready to walk up, and I was like, dang it, like I don't even think I had time to say something, like think of what to say until like I was up on stage already, because then all of a sudden I remembered that guy saying like, well, when you're up on stage, make sure you think of something to say. So I was like, oh crap.
I actually totally forgot. I mean, like, I'd only seen photos of the event and totally forgot that there was a live stream until like earlier today. And I was like, oh yeah, I still haven't taken time to like watch live stream. So, you remember what you said? Can you recap it for us?
Basically, like in my mind, right? Because like my wife was with me the whole time, right? Like this whole trip, right? And even leading up to it, she's like, okay, Ryan, I'm gonna like shoot, like I'm gonna document your whole day, right? And so she's always been, and she was like sitting right behind me, like the whole ceremony, and she was like, I could tell she was like taking photos all the time and everything. And so immediately I was like, okay, I'm gonna have to like thank my wife and my daughters, right? Because they like support, well, as you know, like being a a dad, right? Like a family guy, right? Like
Naturally,
they're like sometimes there's like sacrifices that you have to take, right? Like when I'm painting late night painting session or
of
whatever,
course,
right? And so immediately I was like, okay, I have to thank them, right? I have to thank my wife, my daughters, and then but I think what really messed me up though is because I really wanted to thank them. That's what I was thinking about, right? But then I remember the interviewer or the host up there was like, her question to me was, "How are you feeling right now?" or something along that line. And then so in my mind that really threw me off, because in my mind I was like, normally when you accept a awards, like an award or something, you'd be like, I want to thank blah 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 blah, right? But then she was like, how do you feel right now? So then I was like, oh crap, I'm still gonna thank them. I was like,
that's
well,
not what I
actually,
was thinking to say.
yeah, exactly, right?
Yeah.
So then I was like, oh, I just want to thank like my wife and my daughters for their constant support, right? And then afterwards, I was like, oh crap, I should probably answer her question, right? And then so that's when I was like, okay, well, I feel like really honored, right, to be standing up here amongst all these like amazing builders, right? Because especially like what I was saying before, like when I saw their entries, I was just blown away, right? I was like really floored by a lot of people's creativity and just like it's just really impressive, right? And then I said something along the lines where it's like, oh, I can't wait to party with you all. And then I said like rock on at the end kind of thing, right? And then like and then it was just kind of and then it was really really cool because like the judges can explain to you what they liked about your entry and why it stood out kind of thing. And so
that's like the best part, I feel like.
Yes, exactly. That was 100% the best part, right? And like that's when I was really like, okay, I really got to like listen in on this, right? And they have a live translation, right, when they're saying it. So so that was incredibly cool, right? Like watching about what the judges said, right? And it was really neat because what really stood out to me about what the judges said was like, oh, he was like, it's not common when like a single entry or a simple entry like this can win GBWC, because he was like, most of the times people would like do crazy kit bashes or like have multiple suits telling a story, right? He's like, so it's very uncommon when we choose like a single suit to win, right? And then he said like, oh, but like the concept, the idea of it was executed at a really good level, and like and they really liked the kind of how different it looked and how it still told a story kind of thing, and the craftsmanship involved with it. So that was like really cool because like that was totally I felt like that was my weakness in going into this whole competition, was that my thing looked
Mm,
so simple compared to like a lot of people's, right? But it was
yeah.
kind of cool that the judges kind of saw past that and didn't just look at like, oh, this is just an RX-78, which has been done to death almost, right? And like,
Mm, mm,
and then they took the time to kind of look at the whole thing. And because I told some other people too, right? Like off the get go, one of my goals in general, right, like in building entries, is like to try to make it so that like people who are into the hobby will know like
mm,
all the work I put
mm,
into it. Like when you zoom into like the details and be like, oh wow, this is like
mm,
the 1998 PG, right? Um,
mm,
look how like he changed everything up, right?
mm,
I want like the people who are like veterans in this field, so to say, to like show an appreciation of the craftsmanship involved, right? But I
mm,
also want like I also don't want to lose like the general like hobbyists too, right? Or like people
mm,
who might not know like all these intricate like scribing techniques, but then when they look at the piece, they'll be like, oh wow, like even though I
mm,
haven't seen Gundam build fighters, or even though I don't know the lore of anything, I can tell that like this loading thing is happening, kind of thing, right? And
mm,
so
mm,
so that was, I think, out of everything, like that was the best, was like receiving that input, being like, hey, like
mm,
this simple piece won, right? And like, and I feel like as long as you can make a piece that is well built, obviously, right? But like, but also that communicates clearly what your message is, right? Then
mm.
then that can be an award-winning piece too. So yeah, that was yeah. Again, that was a surprise, right? So
Well, yeah, it's absolutely like exactly what would expect. I mean, like I think you were definitely, going kind of against the norm with your entry, right?
yeah,
I mean, like if you look at
totally.
what got, first place and third
Yeah,
place around you, not only this year, but just like kind of generally. I mean,
yeah,
like that's why you see a lot of those entries with like these big
yeah,
crazy things with like with a ton of stuff, because oftentimes that's what you see
yeah,
in the winning spots. But
yeah,
so I mean, like obviously, yeah, it was going to be a challenge
yeah.
for yours to place, right?
Exactly.
Uh, but no, what it reminds me of a lot is, of course, like Shunege's new Gundam
Oh yeah,
winning years ago,
yeah, yes,
where yeah, I mean, you can get by with like you know it not being such like a crazy thing, and like you're saying, like sometimes when people use like multiple suits or like telling a story or something, and you see that with like some of the entries, but even some of
yeah,
these ones like this one here, I mean, like there's not really too like much of a story. It's just like kind of like
mm,
an elaborate art piece
mm,
essentially, kind of.
mm. Yes.
um but I mean, like what I mean, how yours is kind of similar like to Shinege's is that just it's so high on the craftsmanship, and it's that like it like far and away makes up for the fact that there may not be like as much like story
Yeah,
there. But I mean, like
yeah,
yours does have like the interesting aspect of it, being like
yeah.
a reference to like the
Aw,
build fighters. But I mean,
yeah, thanks.
I'm sure what it came down to a lot for yours. I mean, it's just that the craftsmanship is just so good
Oh,
that it's kind of like on the
oh,
mobile suit itself. So like I have some other photos here,
yeah.
like separate ones I pulled
Oh,
uh,
nice.
of your building process, which we've actually taken a look at,
Yeah,
I think,
yeah.
a little bit on Gunpla
It was
Critique before.
yes, that's right. Yeah. Yeah, so that's the cool thing too, is you were able to see like
Hmm.
this all come together, right, with
Hmm.
time, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, you can talk some more about like the process of the kit, but I mean, I think it's just because like you spend so much time and effort on just the
Mhm,
craftsmanship of the base kit, and then
mhm,
like it was difficult then to do all the later steps of turning it into like the finished product.
mm,
Um, but I mean, there was just so much work put into this part of it that
mhm.
it kind of really helped
Yeah,
everything else after that.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, I mean, let's just. I mean, do you want to go back to the ceremony, or I mean, you want to talk a little bit about? I guess
Yeah,
this is like in chronological order. You want to talk a little bit about just kind of like the building process for it, and
sure.
I'll go through the
Yeah.
photos here.
No, that's
Mm,
great. Like,
mm,
yeah, no, I think this is a great segue into it. And
mm,
so the interesting thing with this one is like, when I started building this, like, I knew I wanted to like detail it up, kind of thing, right?
mm,
Um, one of the first things I did actually, even before all the scribing, was modifying the proportions of the kit. And so you can actually see it here, actually in this image
Yeah.
right now, pretty good. Like exactly, like exactly, right? Like the lower part of the leg, I like extended that one by quite a bit, almost by like a centimeter, almost like it's like probably 8 millimeters or something like that,
Yeah.
right? Where I extended it by. And yeah, and so those are things that might not be like won't be obvious, you know, like unless you see a side by side like this kind of thing, right?
Right.
So I think that was one of the first steps in working on this. And honestly, like extending proportions on a PG is actually kind of tricky because like you're dealing with like a lot of like really complex inner frame details, right?
Yeah.
And so but so I feel like that might have been the thing that took one of the longest things, or at least one of the longest things to like do it cleanly, right? I remember doing like endless like sanding, puttying, sanding, puttying, sanding, puttying. But after that, it was the fun part. Like after all the proportions were tweaked, right? I also extended the arms and then changed up the way the waist articulation is like too on the kit. And
There's
so
that. Yeah.
yeah. So and of course, yeah, this is one of my favorite details, like detail up parts, right? It was like the waist area. And I mentioned this in one of my other it was kind of like in my other write-ups about this piece was like um I tried to look at like all the different iterations of the RX-78. So this is where it was really fun, right? Because I would look at like all the different iterations. Like RX-78 has been done to death, right? Like so many
Yeah.
different versions of it, right? So many different proportions, right? And so this is where it was really fun for me because I would always keep like an open like photo album on my phone, and then I would just look at like all the ones where I was like, "Ooh, I like that design. Ooh, I like this design." And so I would kind of like combine all the aesthetics in terms of like panel line designs and everything that I really liked, right? And then I can like put it on this piece, right? And so one of the big things is like I really wanted to do, you know, like normally when you're working on HG or MG, if you're doing like a notch scribe, right, it's just like a little divot, right? But like for example, on this piece here, I wanted to not only do a notch, but I wanted to add like sub details with, yeah, exactly, right over there, like sub details within that notch. Yeah, exactly. And like, you know, so like little things like that can highlight a little bit, or like it's not a full notch lever, so I do like a main notch and then another tiny notch at the end kind of thing, right? Just to make it give it a little bit more like 3D depth to it. And so that was the beauty of working in a larger scale, like 1/60th scale, is that it allowed me
Yeah.
to like do these things, right? Like it is possible to do on a smaller scale too, but like honestly, it's so hard at that point, right? And like
Right.
even then, like,
Well,
yeah.
I was just gonna say I don't doubt your ability to do that on a 1/100 scale, but fair enough.
But like yeah, but it was also fun when it came to painting because when I was doing these details, I had in mind like, okay, I'm gonna paint this like a metallic kind of, you know, aluminum color or like different things, right? And so so it was really fun. Like this was a really fun process for me because oftentimes when I look at like a panel line design thing or like a suit or like resin kits or something, I'd be like, oh, I like this. Oh, but I don't like this design, right? So this is very fun for me to do, right? And so and also because the original PG is such a blank slate, like there literally is
Yeah.
no detail there. It was the perfect canvas, right, to like do these things, right? And so so I had so much fun doing it. And to tell you the truth, like I actually didn't, even when I started tweaking the proportions and doing some initial panel lines, it was never my initial intention to enter this into GBWC because I started doing this process like a year and a half, 2 years ago almost, right?
Right. Yeah.
But then as I was working so much on it and having so much fun with it, I was like, man, like I think I should enter this, right? But in my mind, I was like, nobody wins like GBWC with an RX-78, right? Like it's so overdone, right? And so, but then part of me was like, you know what? Like in that case, I have to come up with a good like kind of a unique twist on it, right? And then yeah, so I'm the build process. I mean, that's when I slowly kind of started looking. I think it was in 20, actually, it must have been even longer, like 2019, 2020, when there was like that mobile game. It was like Gundam Mobile, like Gundam Breaker 4 or whatever. Like not 4, but like it was like the mobile game, right? And like I always screenshotted that scene where there's the RX-78 with like the loading graphics on it, and I always loved that. So immediately that's when I was like, I wonder if I could do some like that type of paint scheme on this, right? But I don't want to go overboard with that with the grid like loading stuff, because I don't want battle log. Thanks, Chris.
It
I
was
don't want
not
to
battle
go
log.
or
I get out of here,
was
Chris.
it? Oh, sorry.
No, it's like Gundam Breakers, it's like Gunpla Breakers, Gundam Mobile or something like
I
that.
know they called it something first,
goofy
and
name.
then they changed the break.
Yeah,
Whatever.
it did
But
change
anyways,
later on.
yeah. And then like and then I was like, okay, I worked so hard on all these panel line stuff that I don't want to go too crazy on the grids, because you lose everything, right? You lose all the details. So in my mind, I was like, okay, I'm just gonna do it in select areas. But then part of me was kind of like still like I still need like a better story, right? Like or some type of story behind it. Because if it's just a loading Gundam, like what is it loading into? Like, and then it was around that time when I tried to introduce my girls into like Gundam, right? And so for the first anime that would do it, I was like, oh, we're gonna watch Gundam Build Fighters, right? Because that's like a great intro, right? And so we started watching Gundam Build Fighters, and in one of like the earlier episodes, they talk about like the main character's dad, like Takeshi Iori, being like winning GBWC, like that version. And okay, so the funny thing is he won second place in that anime lore too. And
with the Gundam, with the RX-78 Gundam, right?
With his RX-78 Gundam, exactly. And then so after watching that, it clicked with me. That's when I was like, oh, you know what? I'm gonna do like a Gundam Build Fighters overarching theme, because them load into the program. So I'm gonna make it as if it's like loading into this virtual program, and like the particles are kind of like plastic particles, right? And then so that's when everything clicked, and that's when like it kickstarted like everything, right? And then
You know what I was thinking about, which because I knew kind of all the backstory you were just explaining, because I kind of knew about that, how this was just originally just a project just to build the RX-78 like PG, and then like it kind of evolved into this. And like it's thinking about it that way, it's kind of interesting to think about like what this would have looked like had you have had this idea from the start. I feel like you probably wouldn't have gone to as much like level of detail as you did, but it's a good that you did. It worked out the way that it did, because you were going like super detailed with it, because you didn't expect to do this. Like had you originally from the start like thought like I was going to have these like these illuminated grid sections like you did, you probably would have planned to that, and you would have thought like, okay, I don't need to go into as much detail here because I'm going to have this effect.
That's right. In fact, it was so funny because like if you look at the upper, like so the Gundam's left shoulder, there's like a little red like camera on the upper shoulder part, like the other shoulder. There's like a little red detail there, right? And so I really wanted to paint like a red, kind of like a red light camera thing or whatever. And then on the opposite shoulder, I painted actually a green camera detail. And so like
gone.
The funny thing though is I remember finding the right shade of green. Like I didn't want it too dark of a green. I wanted a brighter green because I wanted to make it seem like it's like a light kind of thing. But my green was actually really ugly that I painted there. And I was gonna like repaint it, but then that's when I was like, wait a second, this is gonna be part of the loading grid area, right? I'm like, I don't need to do anything there. So it's funny you mentioned that, because like that's a good point. Like I don't know if I would have gone as crazy into the details if I had the overarching theme of like this grid thing, because that is interesting to think.
And I never really thought about this too much until you mentioned it, but it is interesting to see how it is such an amalgamation of so many different like design aspects from different versions. Like I can see like some aspects of like the Verka, some aspects of like the G3, or not the G3, but like the 30th anniversary, which is like the RG, the 3.0, and the life size one are all that same design. There's like a lot of different design elements from different versions of the Gundam in there.
Exactly.
It's really, really cool.
And at first too, like to tell you the truth, actually, when I first like thought of the concept of like the
Yeah.
whole loading grid thing and everything, part of me was kind of like, I kind of want to paint the RX into a different color scheme. Like
Mm,
at first I didn't want to do it like the regular color scheme. I was thinking of like, like
mm,
Char's Cassavol, like all red, like that would stand out a
mm,
bit more. Or I was even thinking of like using plot plate to do like the full armor Gundam, right? Like to actually
mm,
build up armor pieces. But then part of me, like I always went back to it and I was like, oh, but if I build like the full armor Gundam, like I'd hide all these like awesome details I just spent so much time working on, right? And then part of me was kind of like, you know what? I'm just gonna keep it iconic, like because
mm,
for the people who just know Gundam but maybe not too much into the lore, they won't know like the full armor Gundam. They won't know the Cassavol variant, right?
mm.
So I'm just gonna keep it like normal, right? And so, anyways, like yeah, so it's kind of interesting, like the evolution, I guess, of like how I started working on this and building it, kind of thing. So yeah,
I think this is one of the other things that I really like about this too, and again, kind of shows, and it's great not only for you that you placed where you did, but hopefully it like sets an example for other people too, that like you can win with entries like this, just because hopefully we'll see some more stuff like this in the future,
yeah,
where um like with Shunege's new Gundam before, and like with this one too, it's a really great example of how like you don't have to paint like every single little detail in like a
yeah,
different color, because I can imagine like with
yeah,
someone else, like this little bit would be in like a
yeah,
silver, and like this little bit
yeah,
would be gold,
yeah,
and like this
yeah,
part
yeah,
would
yeah,
be in a different color, and like every single
yeah,
little detail is like in a different color. But like here on the backpack, you kept it like pretty minimal, and like there's a
yeah,
few different colors in there, but it's all
yeah.
pretty much gray, right?
Exactly.
You don't have
Exactly.
all these little bits like popping out, and it's the same thing like with here too. Like you can imagine
Yeah.
someone else would have been like, this is, it is a slightly different color yellow, it looks
Yeah.
like, but it's like
Yeah.
very, very subtle.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
And
I
so like
wanted to keep it really
mm,
subtle. You're
yeah,
absolutely right. Like I always tell people too, yeah, it's nice to have some armor color separation, right?
hmm,
But then when you
hmm,
start doing too much of it, like if the ratio
hmm,
goes out of it, then you
hmm,
no longer have a primary color and it no longer looks like a secondary kind of secondary tone to the color, right?
hmm.
And like another thing too is like the decals actually is a whole other color too, right?
Yeah,
Like if you
hmm,
add like red decals,
yep,
like it's a whole other color to it. So if all of a sudden if you have too many different colors and you're
hmm,
adding like red decals over top, like it
hmm,
starts looking like a puzzle piece kind of thing, right?
yeah, yeah, no, exactly, yeah. That's so that's why, I mean, it's something I feel like I've talked about a million times, and we've talked about in like these different like live streams when we're looking
Yeah.
at stuff on Twitter and stuff like that. But I mean, like, it's great that you placed and get a lot of attention on an entry like this, so that hopefully,
Mm.
I mean, there's
Oh,
no right way to do it. It's not like,
right.
oh, this is the right way and everybody else is
Yeah.
wrong. But I mean, like,
Yeah.
hopefully we'll see, more of a mix of stuff, like this and like that in the future.
Yes.
It's a great example for people to, basically kind of get some ideas off of and get some motivation from.
Oh.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about the decals, actually. I'm sure there's a mix, but most of the
Hmm.
decals, I'm gonna guess, are 1/100 scale decals. Is that right?
Oh, good question. They're actually mostly 1/144th scale.
Okay, right.
So
Yeah, I mean, they
like
look, they're pretty
yeah.
small, but I mean, like, really good for this scale, even though it's not like
Yeah.
the right scale of
Yeah.
decals, right?
Yeah. I
Mm.
most of them, I would say like 80% of the caution markings and stuff are
Mm.
all from the RG new decal
Okay.
sheet.
Yep,
Because
yep.
I just really liked I really like the ones where I knew I wanted more like red caution markings or like
Yeah.
like with the horizontal band of red and then the light
Yep.
gray kind of thing. And
Yeah,
so I
there's a
feel
lot
like
here.
the RG new had like the best variations of them,
Mm.
right? And then a lot of the bigger, so for example, the shoulder and the chest part, that's
Mhm.
actually cut out from the MG 3.0, like
Mm.
the MG 3.0 shoulder. But I
Mhm.
just removed just the outer, like the lines that you see on the MG, but just kept
Uh-huh.
the text
Uh,
part. And
mm.
then some of the really big ones, like for example, the WB on the
On
right
the opposite
shoulder, and then
shoulder there?
yeah, on the
Yeah.
opposite shoulder, and then also on the left knee. Those ones are from those massive sheets, Bandai
Mhm.
decal sheets, like those DX
Yeah, yeah.
series or whatever, or GX. Those are all from there. So
Nice.
It was tricky because there's actually a lot of different grays. Like there's like dark gray, light gray, like in all the Bandai decals. So I had to choose the
Right.
ones that kind of matched the best, right? Honestly, like
Right. Yeah.
when you're looking at it, it's not as it's not
It's
too
not super
obvious,
noticeable,
right?
but yeah, I know what you
Yeah,
mean. Cause like
yeah,
it, yeah, you would think it's just like all just gray decals,
yeah,
but they're
yeah.
not gonna. If you had two right next to each other, you would notice the difference.
Exactly,
Yeah. Yeah.
exactly. And I did a lot of
Um.
like decal stacking. So yeah, so like
Mm, yeah.
combining all these different ones to yeah.
Sure. It's all Bandai? You didn't sneak by with any unofficial
No.
decals in there?
Yeah, this year I was like, I'm not taking a chance at all. In fact, like when they asked, right, wow,
Uh,
what did you do to your model, right? I actually restricted myself to like 4 different sheets of decals, and I told myself I'm
mm,
only using decals from these 4 sheets, or like 5 sheets, if you will. And then I
yeah.
stated exactly which sheets of decals they are.
Uh,
I even took photos of them in case
nice.
if they like emailed me and be like, where did this decal come from, right? So I
Hmm.
stuck really, really close to it, right? And so, yeah,
Very, very lawyerly of you.
yeah.
Right.
I just
But
don't
that's how
want
you have to
any
be, like,
chance.
unfortunately.
Yeah,
But I mean, like,
yeah,
that's another, like, you know, anybody
yeah,
who's wanting to enter, take
yeah,
notes. It's a good idea to do that, and
yeah.
not don't think you can sneak by with any unofficial decals because they might not notice, but if
Exactly.
they do, you
Yep.
might want to be able to make sure that you can prove that all your decals are
Exactly.
official.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, right? Because like I've heard, like I personally, like I know a lot of people who are like, oh, I don't want to compete in GBWC because it's too restricting.
Mm,
Um,
mm-mm.
but I I can understand where they're coming from, right? But at the same time, I feel like it's not restricting if like it is restricting if they're like you can't use plot plate, you can't use, but the fact that they allow you to use plot plate and putty, like yeah, sure, you can't use 30-minute missions kits or whatever, right? But like I feel like that forces you to be more creative in like
Sure, of course.
making
Yeah.
things with like plot plate or whatever, right? And so
Mm,
um I know it's like restrictive in one way, but on the other way, it's kind of like liberating because then it also means like you can make whatever you want with plot plate kind of thing,
mm,
right? And like,
mm.
anyways, like to go in the line with like decals too. Like I think you can still make decals work, right? Like
Of course. Yeah.
yes, I know Bandai decals are not as nice as some other brands, right? But
Mm,
in terms of design, like you can cut up Bandai decals and still isolate certain things to still come up with a nice design kind of thing, right?
mm.
So, but anyways, that's kind of my 2 cents, right? So
No.
yeah.
Yeah, and just I mean, just to kind of circle back to the scale of them too, like you're saying, because you're working with a 160 scale kit, it
Mm,
was helpful for you to be able to get like that super fine detail on there. And the same thing goes with
yes.
the decals as well, because like
Yeah.
realistically speaking,
Yes.
you wouldn't have like text on there. Like if it was a full size thing, you wouldn't have text that's like 2 feet
Yeah,
tall on the screen.
exactly.
Like it would be,
Yeah,
something so that people can read it when they're looking at it. But
exactly.
so
Yeah,
it's very much like in scale, even though
yeah.
the decals don't match,
Mhm.
the scale based on like the product, but like
Yeah,
realistically.
that's right.
Um, one thing that you didn't really have much, you shared a lot of photos, and at least what I've seen, from what I've seen of what you've shared and not shared, is you haven't really shared much about the paint that you use. What paint did you use for?
Yeah. So I used all, Mr. Color paints.
Uh-huh.
It was, Mr. Color 316, so it was like, for the white parts.
Uh-huh.
And then for the off-white part, I actually wrote it all down. Off-white parts is like 315 and 316 mixed like almost like 50-50 kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like real, it's like my basically every single color, like the white, the red, the yellow, and the blue, they all had like 2 shades of it. And so I
Mm-hmm.
made
Mm-hmm.
it out 2 shades of it. Actually, in fact, the white actually has a third kind of warmer shade that I put. You honestly can't see it that well in the photos, but like in
Maybe
person,
right
like
here probably is a
yeah.
good example, isn't it? This one.
Yeah, yeah, exactly,
Mm,
exactly. Yeah,
mm,
exactly. So that has all 3 shades there actually. Like that tiny rectangle is
mhm.
actually the warmer one, and then
Yep,
the
yep.
the
Mm,
lower rectangle is kind of like a colder, just a regular cold gray, and then there's that white, right? And then
mhm,
I used enamels for some of the metallic portions, right?
mhm.
Um, and then but
Okay, here.
mostly for yeah, mostly for like a lot of my metallics, I use all clad metallics. So like pale
Mm,
gold and like
like here.
bronze. Yeah, exactly,
Mhm.
exactly. Those bits were so hard to paint though, Zach, because they're
Mm.
like those rubbery pieces, right?
Oh,
Yeah.
fun.
So those ones are basically you paint and you never touch again.
Yeah.
And I
Uh,
used like a metal primer for those ones because I heard
uh,
they like stick better. I like
mm,
sanded it too, right? But as you
mm.
know, like sanding those like polycap, like PVC things, like or not
Yeah.
like polycap stuff is like it's not the prettiest, right?
No, I mean,
But yeah,
I
you
can
can
tell
tell it's a
just
little
looking
rough.
at it. I mean, you can
Yeah.
see it's pretty minor, but you can tell it has a little bit of a texture
Yeah,
to it that the other parts don't
exactly.
have because it's
Exactly.
it's a sanded
Yeah,
polycap. Yeah, I know.
exactly.
Yeah.
So, but I really wanted that to stand out because,
Hmm,
like,
hmm.
it's very visible
Yeah, it's a nice
when you're
shape
closing it
there.
off.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Mm,
exactly. So,
mm.
yeah. So it was pretty much all Mr. Color and then all clad metallics. Yep.
For the colored sections, the blue, well,
Mm.
maybe not so much the blue. I'm not sure. Let's see, but
Oh, the red too.
the red and the yellow. Did you use any mixed fluorescence in there, or
Ah,
no,
good
to get like
question.
the brightness of the color?
Yeah, I actually used the anniversary. What was that, Mr. Color? Like it's like their it's their like retro anniversary like colors. I forgot what they're called specifically, but it's like specific to the RX-78. It's like their
Yeah.
like anniversary colors. So, but I did tweak them. Basically, I didn't add any fluorescent to them. I just added like white to desaturate them to brighten them up a little bit more.
Mm,
Um, and the red is actually the actual red. It was like the also Mr. Color, like their anniversary, like RX
mm,
78 colors kind
mm,
of thing. And so, but the blue I did tweak. Like the blue and the yellow are the ones I tweaked. And
mm,
um, and with those ones, I added a little bit more like red to it to make it a little bit purplish blue, right?
yeah.
Um, yeah, and yeah, a little bit of white to the yellow. So those ones are more
There
custom.
you go. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. You can tell
yeah,
that, especially like I feel like when you have like that really super subtle like drop of purple in there kind of thing.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
the kind of thing that you don't see on, like, the
yeah,
flat surfaces. You can really
yeah.
only kind of tell it in the shadows. In the
Yes,
shadows, you can kind of tell
exactly,
by it, right?
exactly, exactly.
Mm,
100%.
mm.
Yeah,
So, I got you.
yeah,
That looks really cool. Um,
yeah,
well, so, yeah, I mean, after all of that, and then just to, like, to make the effect, there's a little bit you shared about that too, about, like, I think this was the first photo, or no, wait, this one maybe, to
yeah,
talk about, like, the effect
yeah.
of making the effect on it. So, you had the whole model basically done, and
Hmm.
then go and, like, add the effect on it. So, you can just,
Yeah.
like, explain how this worked.
That's right. You're absolutely right. So like I okay, so even before like showing like talking about this, right? Like
Mm,
I spent a lot of time thinking in my head like how can I make this grid effect, right? Like part of me
mm,
was like, okay, well, it's the easiest, you think, right? To just mask like vertical lines. Like just before you paint the white, right? Before you have any colors, you prime the piece, you paint fluorescent, the white fluorescent color, right?
mm,
And then you mask it with like a thin rectangle, like sorry, thin lines, right, to make the
mm,
grid out of the thin lines. And
mm,
then you paint all the top colors over top of it, right? And
mm,
then you can paint like that pink, blue, purplish over top. And then when you remove the masking, right, then
mm,
you'll see the grid, right? Like that
mm,
seemingly would be kind of like the easiest method.
mm,
But I tried it on a spoon or even just thinking about it, it would be
mm,
a
mm,
lot of layers of paint that you would be adding on
mhm.
top of each other, that by the
Right.
time you, like, peel it off, there's, first of all, risk of, like, chipping the paint, right, as you're
Yeah,
peeling it off,
yeah,
making it look not as clean. But
yeah.
the biggest issue with doing it that way is that I wouldn't be able to put decals on and have the
Mm,
grid effect to appear above the decals, right?
mm,
And so,
yeah.
because that's the whole purpose. Is like I really wanted to make it look like this was like apparating or like appearing with
Mm,
like the decals also there. So
mm,
if you look closer up, you'll appreciate it more, right? But like you can
mm,
actually see the grid over top of the decals, right? So then
mm,
knowing that I was going to do that, the next struggle was like, okay, well, will I be able to mask like lines that are like straight enough that will look convincing enough to look like a grid? Because like
mm.
it's going to take a long time to mask out squares, which is what I ended up doing. But like,
Yeah, yeah.
but in my mind, I was like, it's going to take a long time to do that. And plus, I had to choose like a square that was like tiny enough, but not too tiny. Because when a masking piece is so tiny, it just doesn't stick. It's just gonna like, when you're spraying, it's just gonna flake right off, and you're gonna spill into that area, right?
Yeah.
And so, another option I was thinking of is like, okay, well, what if I scribed those grid lines in, and then I just use, yeah, exactly, right. And then I use panel lining fluid to like panel line those scribed grid marks, right? But then part of me was kind of like, okay, well, it's easy to do that if you just have like a flat piece that you just want to grid out. But it suddenly becomes infinitely harder when we're starting to talk about like going around edges and stuff.
Right.
Like, how can you keep a consistent grid line when you're doing
that?
And it'd be like a nightmare. So so at the end of the day, like I decided to do this, and I was like, okay, this is a huge risk because like I'm literally completely finishing my model. Like I have to. Oh, one thing I didn't mention too is like I top coated it with the UV cut top coat. And UV cut normally is to make it so that UV light doesn't discolor or damage your paintwork underneath, right? But in this case, I use the UV cut to like block all of the black light because I wanted the base layer to not glow at all. Because sometimes decals actually glow pretty brightly under black light, like just naturally. Like even like Bandai decal, like between different brands of Bandai, and so that's why like I had like basically did a gloss coat UV cut. Did the decals, and I did another like gloss coat UV cut, and then I did a matte coat over top kind of thing, right? And so everything is sealed in over UV cut, even the decals, because I didn't want the decals to shine up. And then after everything's done, then I like have to like assemble everything.
Experiment.
Exactly. And like in my mind is like, if I mess this up, then like I have to strip all the paint. And so when I was doing decals too, I had to keep in mind, like, do I have like duplicates of this decal in case like I had to strip the decals as well too? And like, so it was a pretty like I pretty much only had one chance to get this right. And so but essentially this is how I ended up doing it. Like I did that really light pink, and then like that start slightly darker blue, and then the darker blue, and then like masking it out. And you'll actually notice like even in the that armor bit just above, like in the wrist area, you notice that like it's actually not perfectly square, right? In those areas there, because there's certain areas that I couldn't like actually create a consistent grid. I actually had to like skip some areas or cut it into like a trapezoid almost,
it wouldn't fit, right?
Yeah, exactly, right. And so so that took a really long time to figure out. And like some areas that were just hard to mask, I just left it out, and I left that white kind of like the glowing square, because I also wanted not just all grid and then just like some particle effects, because it wouldn't look convincing enough, right? And so so that was kind of nice, where I could just like leave out some areas and just like paint it with the glow, right? And so that honestly took a really long time, and I was like really like nervous doing that whole process. And people were like, well, where'd you get all the squares, right? And I literally I bought like really thin, like I think it was like 0.2 millimeter, like masking tape, wide masking tape, super thin. And then I literally just cut it, like I just cut it with a knife, like, and then I just took the ones that looked most square-like, and then I used those, and the ones that didn't look square-like, I just kind of ditched, right? Because I couldn't find.
You can get.
Yeah.
Actually, here, let me show you. Well, not you. Too late for you. I have a tool here. Hang on, let me see. Master Slicer.
Oh, that would have been so good. So that's like
I've actually not used this tool yet. So, but what it is, it's like it uses multiple blades on the tool at once.
Wow.
So like if you want to cut just like a bunch of either squares or strips of like a certain length, so you could just use like wide ass like masking tape, just lay it on the mat there like that,
and just go,
and then just use this tool, just like with one stroke, it cuts like however many strips you can like adjust the
cool,
the blades on it. Pretty cool. Tool. I've not actually broken it out and used it yet. I haven't had a need for it, but
that'd be cool.
Sorry.
That would have been so good. I was using at first, I was using those like you know those cutting boards with like the indent lines in it that you can cut like masking tape. Let me try to.
Oh yeah,
It's those ones like meant to
I had
meant.
one around here. I think
Oh, it's like these,
maybe
like
not.
these type of boards. Have you seen these?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Mm-hmm.
I was using like the ones with like the vertical ones. So at first I was like using that,
Mm-hmm.
but my squares were not like, because the squares are tinier. So like whenever I was cutting it, the masking tape would just like sink into the groove, and then I wouldn't get a really nice fine cut. It'd be like a
Right.
lip almost. And
Yeah.
then so then in the end I was just like, okay, whatever, like forget about this. I'm just gonna cut it on a cutting board. And
Yep.
so like I just, it just worked out better that way.
Mm.
And it took longer, and I probably cut like, I don't know, hundreds of like squares, but whatever. It was quick, right? And so yeah.
Here, Ryan, you can. Oh, well, let's see what would be better. This or there was that other image here. This one too. You want
Yeah.
to talk a little bit about this? I got to step out real quick. You can
Oh
explain
yeah.
kind of about how you made this. I'll be right back.
Yeah.
You can
Yeah,
explain
sure.
to
Yeah, no
everybody.
worries. I'll explain to
Hang on a
everyone.
second.
Yeah.
Just a second.
Yeah, no worries, no worries. Oh, and by the way, Chris Pabs, like you're totally right. It is that Mr. Color 40th. It's the blood red, and previously you're right. Yep. I really like those colors. And so yeah, so for this one over here, basically I used acrylic, right? And then I designed kind of like the grid pattern that I wanted on, right? And then I laser printed like that grid pattern on there. And with the laser printing is really nice because it cuts away kind of that sheet over top. So in essence, it's already masked off for you, like all those lines. So then what I did is I just painted it with I had a mixture of UV clear with white paint, and then you can see how on step number 3 I just painted it with the UV reactive white essentially, right? And then I did a couple layers of that because the initial layer was a little bit too thin, and you could see through it too much. So yeah, I did a couple layers of that, right? And then I used there's like these like fiber optic. Oh, actually, I have some toys here, like this. It's like this thing that you could buy on Amazon. It's like this like light switch that you turn on, and then it lights up the tips of these fiber optics, right? And so my daughter's had one lying on the side from a birthday party she had gone to, and so I was like looking for materials to help that's strong enough to support like really thin plot plate pieces because I knew I wanted some particle effects. I used many different things. I used kind of like actual thin wire as well too. I didn't like how the thin wire you can actually see the wire more visibly. And so when I saw this lying, on our island, I was like, hey, I'm just gonna try this, right? And so I cut a piece, and then the way I made the particle effects, it was probably a little bit more complicated than I would have liked to, but I basically cut like two like tons of like tiny squares. I use like 0.25 thick plot plate, I think. Like strips. I cut the squares from strips, right? And then I cut 2 pieces, right? So the tricky thing is like figuring out how to attach the fiber optic onto the squares, right? So what I did is I drilled a hole through the one square, right? But if I just glue it like that, there's gonna be like a little like nub on the end that goes through. And if I snip the nub flush with that piece, it's gonna be too weak and it could pop right out, kind of thing. And so I figured out a way whereby I have 2 square pieces, right? I drill a hole through both in the middle through both pieces, right? But then on the top piece, I actually cut like a slit. So it's almost like a C shape, that top piece. And then what I do is I like put the fiber optic through both areas, and then I bend. So say this is like the plastic particle effect. It's like right through, but then I bend the fiber optic onto itself like that, and then I put the top piece of plastic over top, and then I glue that all together, and then I sand it to make it look nice, right? And then so it's much stronger because then like this fiber optic is actually like bent onto the piece, and because of there's another top piece that fits over top, it looks like it's just like a flat particle with like a fiber optic through it, kind of thing. So that's how I kind of made that those fiber optic pieces. It took a really long time to do. because once you glue the fiber optic onto those particle things, it becomes like more brittle, right? But with that method, Zach, I was just telling them how I made the particle effects onto the fiber optic, because like normally if you have like your plot plate, right, and if you put the fiber optic through, like I drill a hole and put it through, and if I just glue it like that, and then if I snip the fiber optic on top like that,
It'll
it
have a
becomes
hole.
yeah, and it becomes too weak of a connection that the fiber optic just pops right off, kind of thing. And so what I did is I drilled through 2 pieces of plot plate, right? And then I actually bent the fiber optic, and then but on the top plot plate, I cut a hole through it, like a trench through it, and then I
Really?
put glue. So it's a little bit more complicated, but with that method, it didn't pop out of the particle effect. So it made it for a lot stronger particle. So yeah, those squares took a really long time. Like probably, I don't know, maybe like I don't know, like 6 hours to do. But it takes a while because I have to wait for the glue to set before I can like cut it to size. I make it bigger first, and then I cut it to size because I cut different sizes,
Right.
right? And then I paint it with the UV paint over top of it. So it probably took like 6. I used super glue. Oh no, I used the white Ray Studios uses it. It's like I don't have it, but it's like essentially like white super glue. The reason why white also because like I wanted to blend in with the white plot plate, right? Because the UV color is more translucent, and so if it was different colors, you'd be able to see through the translucency. So, yeah.
If it's gonna be white anyway, if it's not gonna be white, then you have to use something else.
True. Yeah,
that worked out.
Pabs is right. Yeah, the CA glue makes it really brittle. And so so this glue is kind of like a white putty glue. It's like a filler glue, if you will. I don't. I forgot the name of it, but I don't have it here. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, shoot, man. And then the final part is just the structure itself, which was a whole thing too.
Yes. So like I don't have any experience in like soldering, or no, well, a little bit with soldering, right? But I was watching other like I love following like other makers on YouTube, like not even like Gunpla, but like Adam Savage, right? And like or other builders too. And so there was this one builder who was like, oh, like how to weld metal together without like using weld kind of thing. And they're like, JB Weld works perfect, right? So I was like, oh, I'm gonna try that out. And so so with the build, it came like a couple of really big challenges. This one was one of them, right? Which is how can I suspend the whole PG Gundam just from the back skirt, right? And so I knew I needed like a metal rod to support it. Like there's no way I could build this out of plot plate and expect it to support. So the back rod in my whole piece is like metal, is like this brass, right? And then I made like a metal truss. Exactly. So that back part is metal, but it's like I obviously painted it white, right? So it blends in really well with the 2 rods on the front, which are plow rods actually. And so I mean like that was the hardest thing. One of the hardest things is how can I suspend it? So when I realized I can suspend it with that metal thing, I was like, oh, this is amazing. Like I think this will work, right? Of course, the second challenge was like making the grid part, which I already explained, right? Like on the grid painting, right? And the third difficulty thing was like making a base that would completely saturate this whole area. Like for example, in this photo right now, Zach, that you're looking at, it's like in my cupboard with like spotlights on it, right? So because normally like blacklight effects are really only effective when all the lights are turned off, right? But I wanted to make it so that even when the lights are on, you can still see the effect to some extent, right? And when I remember, do you remember Tim's entry, like the Zaku parachuting down? No, it's not Zaku. Sorry,
Jesta.
It's Jesta. Yeah. Sorry, there was an image of a Zaku parachuting now, but yeah, right. His is the Jesta parachuting. And I remember one of the things that Tim mentioned was that when he set up his entry in Japan, because the parachutes were covering the spotlights, it made his entry completely dark, right? And so that really like didn't play well for him, right? Because like the judges couldn't see anything that was going on beneath the parachutes, right? And so all along I knew that like I didn't want to keep the top part like covered. I wanted like it to be open like a ring. And so And so one of the tricky things is like making this field in the center that's completely saturated with black light. So speaking of that top ring, one of the things that I had to do is like I can't just like rewire the LED lights to be like in the cylinder formation around the ring because it's just going to point straight down the center.
Yeah,
So I
yeah.
actually I made like these like I use like pla plates, right? To tilt it at a 45-degree angle.
Mm.
And then I soldered, you know how like normally LED light strips are all in one strip? So I
Uh-huh.
like cut each strip and then I soldered it at an
Uh-huh.
angle so that it's all facing at a 45-degree angle pointing down into the model. And so that was a huge pain to do because I had to
Yeah.
solder each positive and negative connection, and I had to make sure each connection was good, right? Because
Uh,
it's in a series, right? And like if it's not good, then I'd be
not gonna
messing,
work.
I'd be screwed, right? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so that was really tricky because I had to solder it on each single one, right? And so each single connection is pointing down towards the model. Oh yeah, see, you can see it there, right?
See
And
here,
so you can see how it's angling at an angle there, right? And
mm,
then and then the two front pillars on my piece has also two strips of LED light that's pointing back
mm,
towards the model too. And of course the base itself has a ring light as well too, right? So
mm.
it's like completely saturated, right? This whole field like um yeah, and so yeah, so I mean that was another big challenge was making a black light field that would support everything, right?
Mm.
And yeah, so that was another tricky thing. Yeah.
Yeah, it's one thing. I mean, just you were touching on it there, but just to elaborate for people who maybe haven't heard us talking about it before, because I'm sure we talked about that a lot on like an old episode of Gunpla Talk or something like that. But just to kind of elaborate that, because it's a good opportunity for, I mean, talking about this, you know, it's interesting to hear about your process, but it's good information to give people who maybe want to enter in the future
Mm,
that like you really do also have to consider how the piece is going to be lit there at the
yeah,
event, how the judges are going to see it.
yeah.
Because if we take a look back, I want to switch back to the other set of photos from the event. So you
Mm,
can see here, it's like we were just seeing it like your studio photos, and like
yeah,
here's how it was like actually at the event. So I mean, like
exactly.
you have to take that into consideration.
Yeah,
The lighting
exactly.
is just bad. It's
Yeah,
not good.
it
So
was really bad. And like the
yeah.
thing is like because they actually have four spotlights,
Mm-hmm.
and like so it's like really really harsh lighting, right?
Yeah.
And I mean
Mm-hmm.
like it actually even looks different in person compared to like photos as well too, but like
Yeah.
because even in the photos I actually already had to tweak like because the white spots were too blown out
Yeah. Yeah.
and like the dark spots were too dark like underneath kind of thing,
Mm.
right? But like
It's very harsh.
yeah,
Mm.
very very harsh lighting, right? Like even this one, for example, this one like I had to really tweak the whites because
Mm-hmm.
the top was all really white and the bottom
Mm-hmm.
was really shadowed out, right? But I really wanted to bring out kind of like brighten the bottom up more because there's so much beautiful elements to it, right? So the one thing is if you look at the Korea winner, it was like it was the other RX-78 kind of sitting I think it's yeah, later on entry, even later, I think.
Did I
Uh,
miss it? Did you send it? I don't know if you.
yeah,
I don't remember if it was
it's like
in the
sitting
image.
on like a pedestal. I think it's up more. Oh, no, no, yeah, it's up more. Sorry.
That's
Wait,
it.
I must have sent it.
I'm not sure if I remember seeing it in the images that you sent, so it might not be here.
Oh man.
I
Yeah.
think then from here, unless there's a
Oh, that one,
different.
that one,
Oh
that one,
yeah,
that
this
one, that one.
one. Yeah,
This
yeah.
one.
Okay.
So
Uh,
this one I had to really tweak the white
uh-huh, uh-huh.
because the top part is really like blown out, you know,
Yeah.
and like the bottom was really shadowed out. So I mean, again, like in person, like it looks different because like it doesn't look, your eyes don't see it as completely blown out, right? But still, it's like a big difference, right?
Mm,
So
yeah.
I mean, yeah, that's one big thing too. You're right. Like thinking of that. I mean, it's rare to like build something and then think like, oh, I'm going to be displaying this in Japan, and so Japan. But you're absolutely right. Like in that setting, it's so important, right? At
Mm.
the World Finals, like to think about that. So, yeah,
Like you said, for Tim's, like you know, that kind of thing, you would, I mean, I don't know what you can do about that. I mean, like if you have a vision, if you have a vision for a piece you want to make, and like if for like the example of Tim's, like the parachutes are a pretty important part of the piece, right? I
Yes.
mean, and then what do you do about the light? I mean, I guess
Exactly.
in theory, maybe he could have made the parachutes out of like a more translucent material that would like allow some light through. Like
Or
we would have been the only way around that.
or he could have put like lights on the base to point
Yeah,
up
yeah.
at it or something. I mean, like you'd have to like really control it at that point, kind of thing, right?
So yeah,
but
something to think about, that like if something that's gonna make shade, if that is really important to the piece, you got to think about like how you're gonna light it, and you can use your own additional lights or something.
Yeah,
there are outlets there for people to use.
Yeah,
so it's important to know.
Yeah,
exactly. But yeah, sorry, was there anything more you wanted to talk about just like the construction of the base of that?
That's pretty much it. It was like mainly figuring out some of those like hard parts kind of thing, right? But that's pretty much it. Yeah.
There was one more part of that I wanted to ask you about, the band around the center of it.
Oh yes. Yeah. So that band, right? So okay, so I got that idea from watching this anime movie called Belle. And I really like that movie actually. But it's basically like a video game. You have a video game avatar. When the avatar was loading, there was this like band of text around it. And I was like, oh, because all along, and I remember we even talked about this, Zach, is like how the middle part looks really empty. And so, because at first, like I didn't know what to do. Like I knew I might have wanted to add particle effects on the base kind of thing, like pointing up. But then still, I thought there was too much negative space right in the middle area. And so when I saw that movie and I saw that loading thing around that avatar that was loading into that, the movie character, I was like, oh, this is perfect, right? I was like, I'm going to like put that font loading, right? Onto that area. The tricky thing is like I tried different materials, right, to see what can hold its weight, right? And in the end, I found this like thin, like I don't know if it's like acrylic sheet. It's a sheet meant for like a temporary windshield. So people put it on like those ride-on lawnmowers. Like they might use like a temporary windshield or something if like the glass is broken. It's like I don't think it's acrylic, but it's like a polycarbonate type of material. And so I didn't know how it would work, so I literally cut strips of it and then laser engrave like the loading kind of font on it, right? And it turned out like working out like a charm, because when it was laser engraved, it like indented it into this thin acrylic as well. And then so I was able to just paint and essentially like panel line, if you will, that loading thing onto it. But after panel line, I tried like several iterations of it, and I probably ruined maybe like 3 or 4 of them because the loading didn't glow quite the way I wanted to with just the UV paint. And so what I did too, just to put more oomph to it, is I panel lined it, and before it's set, I like drizzled like UV powder. It's like I think it's like Warhammer like stuff that was used. Our local store had it, and he's like, hey, try this out, Ryan, like, because I know you're doing a UV build, who knows, you might be able to use some of this UV powder, right? So I'm so thankful he like gave it to me, because like that was the thing that worked, because like before it's set, I would literally like dip that thing into the powder, and then I would just like, and then I would do, I just use like, I forgot what I use, like alcohol or whatever, just to like wipe away the excess, and then it will wipe away the powder as well too. I had to do it really carefully, and then it left like this like ultra glowy kind of like infill in the loading graphic, right? And the funny story with this too is like when it came time to thinking of the name for my entry, I had so much struggle thinking of it. And I was like, I can't think of a name. Like, I forgot whatever the names I was thinking of, right? And then in my mind, I was like, I kept on looking at the loading thing, and I'm like, do you think it's corny if I just call it loading? and then loading with like a ... right? And then because you see that all the time, right? Like when you're waiting for things to load, right? And so it's funny because during the announcement for the announcer, when they announced my entry, he was like Ryan Lau from Canada, like loading ... like he actually said like
all right. Was it the guy, hey, not to get you off track, but it looked like in the photos from the event, was it that same announcer guy who's like a really goofy voice who was there last year?
He has like a wrestling voice.
Yeah.
I think he does it every year. He even did it my year, like in 2018.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
yeah. So his English is impeccable though, but like
Sure.
obviously his
Yeah.
Japanese is too. But yeah, you're right. He has like a WrestleMania type of voice, you know?
It's
Like
really goofy.
Ryan now, like
Mm.
loading dot kind of thing, right? So it was so funny.
Mm.
And then so yeah, so when I thought of like loading, I was like, oh, you know, I think that's the most appropriate name. And then I thought it was like maybe possibly clever of me to like put the entry title because on the actual GP base, right, it says
Mhm.
like entry name, right? And then I was like, oh, that'd be smart to put loading there, right? And then
Mhm.
so that's how the whole name came up. But it all came up because of that ring, the whole
Oh,
loading entry name. So yeah,
nice.
yeah.
So, here's a tricky question for you,
Mm-hmm.
which only you can answer. What's the I mean, because you know how it is. Once you finish with your piece, and no one else is gonna notice this, but what's the thing that we're never gonna notice that you know about where like you don't like it? You
Oh,
know what I'm talking
that's
about?
I do. Like, what's the one like Achilles heel kind of thing, or like,
Yeah, just something
or
that like that sticks out to you, but
yeah,
like you're aware of the fact that all right, this is something that like it was immediately noticeable to me, but like no one else is really
that's
going to notice or care about. I mean, like you mentioned, I'm sure like you would have loved like the grid on like the wrist part, for example, like not being perfect, and just,
mm-hmm.
there was like no way to do that. But I'm sure
Yep,
like if there was a way, I'm sure
yep,
you would have loved for that to be exactly
yeah.
right. But is there anything else that sticks out
That's
to
a
you?
really good question, Zach.
I don't know.
Um,
Just kind of curious.
that's a really good question. Let me think.
Or you could just say it's just
Uh,
perfect. And
no, no. There's no such thing as perfection. Let me see. Oh, there is one. It's really interesting. So, now that you show me this photo, it brings it back. Okay, so, um, on the Gundam's right yellow chest vent, the other one, yeah, that
Mhm.
one, along the left side of it, like the left border of it. Actually, you might even be able to see that area was because I don't know if it's obvious, but like I actually completely changed the chest vent area. Like if you look at the chest vent in the original, it's just the yellow part that fits over top. But
Mhm.
I wanted to make it so that it's so that the
It's
blue part
inside.
exactly it's
Yeah, yeah.
inside. So I
Mm.
basically like put like a plot plate border around it, and then
Mhm.
so this yellow vent was sanded smaller so that I can inset it into the blue part, right?
Mhm.
But in the process of sanding it, and also I think because the kid is old, the plastic got really brittle and it actually
Mm.
cracked. It cracked. So like
Uh-huh.
that
Yeah,
side,
yeah.
like right where your mouse is,
Yeah.
essentially, like maybe a little bit lower, that's where it cracked. And
Mhm.
like I tried gluing it like all the time, but every time when I inset it, I think it's because it's one of those friction fits where it's like here, and then you gotta shove it in, and it kind of like friction fits kind of thing. And every time it goes in more, it cracks more. And
Mhm.
so even after like everything I done, I even tried like putting like a plow plate in the back of it to like support it. But after everything during final assembly, I like put it in and I felt that little like, and I'm like, oh my goodness. And then I look at it. If you like look at it with like a magnifying glass, you'll be able to see that seam, right? But
That
like
it's
it's one of
still
those,
cracked?
yeah, it's one of
Mhm.
those things where like you put it in and then it cracks, but then it kind of gets back together. But then if you
Mhm,
push it in
mhm.
anymore, it's gonna spread out,
Mm.
right?
Mhm.
And so that was always the issue with it. Like, and it was really tricky because every time you handle the torso, you want to put your thumbs right on the
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Mhm.
right to hold it. So I always had to remind myself, don't push it in any further. It's gonna crack
Mhm.
more. I was afraid the other side would crack, and then the whole thing would like come in half, and then I'd be really messed up, right? So
Mhm.
anyway, so that is the one thing that yeah.
That's the worst. That's the worst when there's, like, a really brittle part, like, right
Yes.
in, like, the one spot where it's, like, most
Yeah.
natural to, like, hold the kit. It's like
Exactly.
and you
Yeah.
always have to be, like, so super focused and careful when you're holding the kit. It's like, "Okay, don't hold it in
Exactly.
that exact part right there.
Exactly. And so I had to really be careful. And like another thing too, because if you notice like on the chest too, like I actually sealed up the old like open hatch gimmick because like the shoulder parts could actually flip up in the original, right? But I
On the
sealed
top
those.
part
Yeah,
here.
on the top. No,
Oh
like
yeah,
oh that
no,
too,
this
but even
part
like
here.
yeah, exactly. That
Yeah,
panel line actually like the whole thing like flips
yeah.
up, right? And so I actually glued it down, right? So that because I didn't like that panel line there, it like just ran
Yeah,
through everything. And so I
yeah.
actually sealed that up, right? But
Mm-hmm.
it's one of those classic ones where I seal it up, I prime, and I'm like, dang it, you can still see that
You can
thing
still see
there.
it. Yeah.
And then I like putty it, and then I like prime it. It was like it probably took me like 5 or 6 times to like make
Jeez.
smooth, right? And then
Mm.
like and then so I have to be careful like not to push down on there that area too much either, because like I don't want to
That
like
that
break
could
that
bust
or
open too.
yeah,
Yeah.
right. So that's another fragile spot too, right? So,
Did you
but
put that in? So this is something else that's not included in these photos. We've talked about it. Like I said, this is like going back years into like Gunpla talk.
yeah,
If you guys, anybody watching, is like very interested in knowing kind of more about GBWC, like check back like some of those old episodes.
yeah,
But like this is one of the other things that we talked about is the importance of the instructions that you include for
mm,
the Bandai staff about how to
yes,
disassemble the kit and pack it up again later when they send it back to you. So like
yes,
did you include that in your like where not
yeah.
to press on the
So
kit?
exactly. Like I
Uh-huh.
actually showed a picture of
Mhm.
like only handle torso and I actually like told him to avoid the complete like blue part. I said hold it by the waist, the red waist
Yeah.
area instead. I was
Uh-huh.
like handle it like I was like handle it exactly like I show in the photo kind of thing, right? And so
Mhm.
I hope they like follow it. And I even like
Yeah.
asterisked it kind of thing, right? Be like don't put I didn't say don't put thumbs on the chest area specifically, but I was like handle it exactly like I show in the photo kind of thing, right?
Yeah,
So
I would have said like put like a take this
yeah.
photo and like put a big X right here, like do not put pressure here, do not put pressure here on the kit
Yeah,
kind of
yeah,
thing.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
But I mean,
Yeah,
like, yeah, it was when we talked about that. We talked about that a lot, like with Tim's entry. I think it was like 2019 for that one.
mm,
Yeah, like you
yeah,
basically have to also, it's like a part that you don't really see
yeah,
in like GBWC stuff. It's kind of like a very behind the scenes kind of thing. You
yeah,
have to put together like a PDF booklet about like how to
mhm.
disassemble and pack the kit for the Bandai staff to refer to when they send it back to you later.
That's right. And I think this year, Zach, was even harder because the GBWC was held it wasn't held in Odaiba. And so it
Oh,
was
really?
held
Oh,
in like
mm.
Shinjuku, like a whole different like
Oh
conference
yeah.
area. And
Mm.
so what they ended up doing is they ended up moving. So that was only like a weekend thing, right? And
Mm.
so they actually moved our entries. I know for sure they moved the top three spot entries, like the gold, silver, and bronze, back to Gundam base. So they had to take it apart and reassemble it. Because normally we just
Oh,
have to make
geez.
instructions for disassembly, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But they actually had to disassemble it and reassemble it again in Odaiba on behalf of us, right? And the only reason why I know that is because I saw some Twitter photos of people posting like, "Oh, here's the top 3 places," right? And because at first in my mind I was like, "How did they like? They must have had to disassemble it and reassemble it." Because like when I look at my photo, I can see like in the arm part, like the armor is like slid down a little bit, which is like a
Uh,
common thing that happens if you don't articulate the arms properly,
uh-huh.
because it's just attached by magnet for me, right? And
Okay.
so I saw that and I was like, "Oh, dang! They totally like reassembled it again,
Yeah.
right?" Like and so yeah, so it was more bizarre this year, right? Because they had to like do it multiple times, right? And also
Mm.
I knew also because I stuck a air tag in my case,
Oh, okay.
and then so I knew
It moved.
exactly where it was moving, right? So
Nice.
yeah, so this year was even trickier because yeah, and I think there's
Mm.
word that they're moving the champions, like just the gold medalist, to like Osaka as well too, which is
Oh,
like
really?
crazy. So like
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know what they're gonna do. Like, it might just be the gold champion, but I don't know if they're gonna do it for like the silver or the bronze or whatever, right? So
That
yeah,
seems like asking for trouble.
I know, right? Yeah,
He's gonna take it on a tour and visit all the
I
prefectures in
know,
Japan.
I know. A lot of them are really complex. So yeah, yeah,
All right.
yeah.
Well, last thing here, we'll wrap it up pretty soon, but just on a last note, and we got some good photos here for this. I mean, obviously, aside from all the fun in quotation marks the stressful part of the event of like
Yes.
going and setting up your entry and having to transport it and do all that, and the construction of it. Like the best part is the ceremony and meeting all the other contestants and meeting
Yes.
all these great modelers and all the fun parts of
Yes.
that. So you want to talk just as like kind of a last
Ex-
note about like the experience with everybody else there?
Totally. That's a great question,
Mm.
Zach. So
Mm.
you're absolutely right. Like the highlight of the entire trip is like it's not the trophies that you win. It's not like the
Mm.
kits that you get, right? Like truly it is like the modelers that you meet. The analogy I tell people it's like we all speak different languages, we're from different countries, but we have that common passion for Gunpla. And
Mm.
it's like really it's just so cool. It's like you're meeting like-minded individuals, right?
Mm.
And this year especially I felt like everyone was like just happy to be there, right?
Yeah.
Like nobody
Mm.
had that personality where they're like, "Oh,
Mm.
I'm gonna, beat everyone else in the world stage," kind
Mm.
of thing, right? Like everyone was genuinely
Who
just
would
so
go there with that kind of personality?
yeah,
Jeez.
yeah. I don't know, but it
Mm.
was like it was so wholesome. That's a good word
Yeah,
for it.
yeah, yeah.
And I remember like even we had this chat group going on leading
Mm.
up to this whole event. Like in January when I found out, I was like, I'm gonna start a Facebook chat group with all the countries, right? And so we managed to find all 16 countries to be part of
Mhm.
this Facebook chat group. And it was so nice because we were all able to break the ice on that chat group. So then when we came
Sure.
together in person, it was like it was just like meeting longtime friends kind of thing, right? And
Mm.
yeah, so it was just so cool, right?
Mm.
Yeah, and it was nice like talking like we talked more than just about our entries, right? Like for example, this was we
Sure.
were hanging out
Sure.
afterwards, right? At like this is actually a Gundam base, like in the food court area there, and
Uh-huh.
it was we shared a meal. We had a meal together because this time was different in regards to like 2018 because like right after the event ended at 5 p.m. They told us they're
Mm.
like, okay, right at 5 p.m. everyone is on their own. Like you have to go find your own transportation back to the
Leave.
hotel. Yeah, pretty much, right?
Leave.
And it's like you're done. Like, what are you
It's
doing
closed.
here? Yeah, right. And then so in our chat group leading up to this whole event, I was like, hey guys, like, do you guys want to go to like Gundam Base right afterwards? Because like apparently now, like I think on weekends or busy times, like you actually have to like
Mm.
apply for a lottery just to walk into Gundam Base because it's like so
Really?
busy.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
You
like they
have to like
told us
queue
that
up
like
and all that?
yeah, so they yeah,
Mm.
exactly, right? So they told us that like with our GBWC name passes that we actually get like front of the line access and we could just go right into Gundam Base, right? So that
Yeah.
but it only lasts for like that Saturday and the Sunday after. And
Yeah.
so that's why I was like and most people were leaving on Sunday morning, so that's why our only opportunity would have been that night to go. So
Mm.
then yeah, so it was really cool. Like a bunch of us went, right?
Mm.
And yeah, we can like celebrate more at that venue, right? And just kind of shop together and stuff. And so yeah, here I'm sitting across from like the Taiwan winner, the Australian winner, the UK winner, like I'm right beside the Italian winner, or like the Europe and Middle East winner, right? He's from
Yeah,
Italy.
yeah.
And even Diego, like he's one of his friends. Like, so that's another cool thing is like some of them brought their friends along. Like
Yeah.
Domenico is the guy right beside me, right? And
Yeah.
then Diego's the guy beside him. And Diego is like a really good modeler, right?
He's
And he's like
won or he's been the representative in the past, right?
he won, I think, second or third place in Europe last year, but
Okay.
like he
Yeah.
won Tetsujin last year.
Okay, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, he went all the way down in Singapore. But like it's so cool because like not only are you meeting the country's representative, but you're meeting like other people, right? And like
Sure.
beside Domenico is Dan, right? Like the US representative, right?
Yep,
And
yep.
Dan
Mhm.
brought his friend Skyfire Lang, right? And like
Yeah.
it was so fun. Like they're such fun people, right?
Mhm.
Really good, down to earth people. And like so yeah, it was just fun shopping. Like, yeah. You can
There
see
was
us just
another
like
good
walking around.
photo I wanted to show here. Here you go.
Yeah. Yeah,
Good
exactly. This
phone.
is on our way there, right? And
Mm.
so yeah, it was so nice, right? Just to get together.
And this is
Yeah, Jackie
the
from
Jackie
Australia.
from Australia.
Exactly.
Right, 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 right.
So his
Mm.
daughter won the Australia for under 14. And so
Oh, okay.
he accompanied her. So I was really because you interviewed Jackie before too,
Yeah,
actually.
yeah. Uh-huh.
and I love like Jackie's work. It's so
Mhm.
like unique and original, and so it
Mm.
was a real pleasure to meet Jackie there too. So like again, it was
Yeah.
like it was just like other modelers that I can meet as well too. And these are people
Mm.
who like I love their work so much. Like Jeff, like Majeki.
Oh,
Have you ever met?
um,
You've probably seen, yeah, on the
I
right
think you're
side
right.
there.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So he is like, oh man, like he's so talented. Like it
Mm.
was so
Yeah, yeah.
cool meeting him. He was one person that like I would talk a lot with online leading up to it. And I was like
Mhm.
really looking forward to meeting, right?
Mm.
And so it was so cool just like, you know, meeting him in person, shopping around, and he brought along some of his actual works like that he's working on, and I was able to like look at them too. And so it
That's
was,
cool.
yeah, it was really cool. Yeah.
Did you find that, I mean, like, we've experienced this when we've met
Hmm.
IRL. I mean, like,
Yeah.
you find that, like, when these people, in this kind of situation that
Yeah.
through the hobby, but when you meet them in person, like,
Yeah.
most of the time you're
I
not
know what you're
actually
saying.
talking about, like, hobby stuff, you're just talking about,
Exactly.
like, normal life stuff. Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah,
Dude, I remember just chatting with you about like your flooring and stuff like that, or like
yeah.
other stuff. But it was really fun. Like at some point I remember thinking in my head, I was like, wow, it's weird that I'm like chatting with Zachary Aurelius about like house stuff.
Yeah.
It's like it was like
Yeah,
really special. Yeah, like I
not
love that, right?
hobby stuff,
Because we
yeah.
all, yeah, it was just really cool. Like it's just like chatting with friends, right? So
So you
yeah.
found that, like, at the GBWC, I mean, like, sure, because you're there, like, for the event, obviously you're talking about, like, stuff going on with the event, but I mean, like,
Mm,
all of my experience, and then, like, when I've been, like, as a guest of Tim
hmm.
before too, and then, like,
Yeah.
just being there at the event, I mean, like, people are mostly just kind of talking about, like, their normal life stuff, or, like,
Yeah.
being there in Japan and things, like, what they've done
Yeah.
there in Japan and everything else going on, not so much about, like, "What kind of paint do you use?"
Yeah.
kind of thing, right? Like,
Exactly.
nobody talks
Exactly.
about, like, this kind of stuff.
Yeah. In fact, it
Unless
was
they're talking
funny.
about, like, their entry, and he's like, "Oh, I love
100%.
that part of your entry," or something like that, but
Yes. Exactly.
that
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It was totally like that. In fact, it was funny. There was one moment when we're setting up our entry, and then
mm,
Domenico beside me, and also Jeff Majecki on the other side of
mm,
me.
mm,
They both had like little areas that had like chipped off their dioramas, and they needed glue.
mm,
So I remember like I was like, "Oh, I have glue. Like I'll lend it to you, Jeff." Right? And like and in fact, even like the UK winner, he had like Jonathan. He had like he fixed out everything though, like some connection issues and stuff like that, and he needed to
mm,
like solder connections. But it was really cool because in our chat, we were sharing pictures of like, oh crap, like this is messed up or this is messed up. Everyone immediately is like, oh, do you need glue? Like, do you need this? Like, do you need help? Like, we can pop by and like
mm,
help resolder things for you. They're like, oh no, that's good. And like
mhm,
during the assembly part, like I like handed him my glue, and he's like, "Oh, sweet, I use the same glue." And so it's like kind of neat, like it's just like, "Oh, same tools," like, "Oh, same." And so that
right,
was probably the only time when we did talk about materials. But you're
right,
absolutely
yeah,
right. Other than that, like it was
mm,
all just like, "Hey, like how, like what do you do for a living? Like how
mm,
you have family, blah blah blah." Like it
mm,
was really really neat, right? So
mm,
um yeah, yeah.
yeah, I mean, it's just it's a fun time.
Yeah.
So, AGVM there in the chat asked, "What's the greatest tip
Yep.
to modelers who wants to join GBWC?" I mean, like, we've talked about a
Mhm.
lot of things, but I mean, considering the fact that you started this work, like you said before, like, you
Mm.
didn't think from the start that this was for GBWC.
Yep.
So, I mean, if there's anything, I mean, like, I'll defer to you, but I mean, I guess, is there anything that you would say would be like a great tip for anybody
Good
who wants to enter GBWC?
good question. And I think like one of the things I've observed over the years is like I
Mhm,
think no matter what your concept is, right? You have
mhm,
to make it so that in your finished piece, it can clearly communicate what you're trying to communicate. I know that
mm,
sounds confusing, but like sometimes
mhm,
people will have in their mind, like, I'm going to make a battle scene where this guy's fighting this guy's damaged, and then this guy's going to return fire to this one, right? And then by the time
mhm,
you make it, people looking at it, they might not see the same story as what you're trying to communicate. So I guess what I'm trying to say is like
mm,
the analogy I have is like when I was younger and I would write like essays, I would always try
mm,
to like make my essays sound like extra good, extra like
mm,
nice words, long words, big words, right? But then
hmm,
when the teacher started reading the essay, she'd be like,
mm.
Ryan, I don't really know what you're trying to say here, right? She'd be like, well, rather than using these words, why don't you rephrase it with more simple wording? And it's more important to be like concise than it is to sound complex, right? And so that's kind of the one thing I see is like when it comes to GBWC, I know like a lot of people are like, yeah, no longer will a single suit pass, right? And I kind of agree with that. Like if you just make a single thing on like an action base, right? Probably won't be as competitive as someone who makes a very unique base that goes along with it, right? Not that it has to be a diorama or it has to tell a story every time, right? But I know they look a lot at like how your piece and your base complement each other. And so one of my biggest tips is like make as much time as you spend on your model, you have to spend at least as much time on your base, right? And so because I see all too often people have like such a complex suit, but then their base is just slapped on together. And then so when the judges come and they look at it, immediately they're gonna dismiss it because it's gonna be like, wow, you know, this suit is really pretty. It's like really nicely done, but this base just doesn't jive with it, right? And so those are some of the things that kind of like conflict with your piece, right? Beyond just making it simple and easy to understand kind of thing, right? And also like recognizing that there's a difference between like a vignette and a diorama, right? Like a diorama has like more of a story element to it. It has several elements to it, right? Whereas a vignette is like has one primary element to it and then maybe some side story things, right? And so and so but being very clear in what you want to communicate. And I would say that's like more like a big overarching tip, like a big story kind of picture, right? And like, but of course, like other things that can give you an edge is like, this is what I've told a lot of people is like, of course you want to think of like an original idea, right? Of course, right? Like nowadays, like some people are like, oh, everything's been done already. It's hard to think of an original idea, right? But you know, like there are times where you might see a piece and be like, oh wow, I've never seen that before, right? And so another tip I tell people too is like, even if you don't have the most original idea, you kind of want something on your piece to grasp the judges or the viewers attention initially, right? Like so for example, what I mean by that is like, let's take like my piece for example, right? Like when you first look at it, the first thing that jumps out at you is probably not like, oh, like how detailed the RX-78 is. It's probably like the particle effects, right? And so like that's the initial grab that you have of the judges or of the public, right? And then once you grab them, and once it's just like writing an essay again, right? If you have a really engaging introductory sentence, then you're more engaged to read the rest of it, right? And so once people start looking more into your entry, then they're like, oh wow, like I start noticing more details on your piece, right? Oh wow, like look at like this whole thing tells a story in a way, right? And so that's how like I tell people, it's like you kind of want that initial attention grabber, whatever it is, right? Whether it be in your paintwork or the pose, right? The really dynamic pose to your piece, right? And then as you draw their attention, then it gains interest. And then when they look more into it, that's when your little details start to shine, right? And so, yeah, so that's kind of like, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, just like you're saying, I mean, like if I just saw this, like, especially amongst other finalists, I mean, like, because you're talking about like competing there at the finals. I mean, like when you're competing just to be like the representative for your country, I mean, you're competing against you know, dozens and dozens, if not hundreds, depending on you know where you're at. You want to stand out with those, but I mean, like even just like about the finals here, I mean, looking at the rest of these, I mean, this immediately stands out because like no one else really has anything that's like this shape, like this silhouette, is like completely unique from others. So like you're saying, you know, if you saw this in a vacuum, you might think, okay, it's like an RX-78 like you're saying, like, you know, nothing. Okay, it's a cool like RX-78 like amongst entries, but like it has that aspect that's like quite different. And like you're saying, then you kind of like looking at it more closely, and like I said, like kind of going back way back to the start of the conversation, where I feel like it is once you start looking at this close up, and that's where like you really start to notice like just how much value that this has, just like specifically in like how good the modeling is just on the base model, and it's like, okay, wow, that's like really good. So I think like for sure I get what you're saying. And then like with some of the entries here too, like you're saying about the difference between like a vignette, something like this,
exactly,
right, versus something like this here, for example, which I mean, like this one's also kind of maybe a little bit difficult to kind of define between one and the other.
Or even like Italy's kind of thing, like with the bridge overpass and the
where was that? That's a good example.
Yeah, that was
some of these are kind of like blurry.
In between.
This one's like very clearly a diorama scene, like right where you're meant to draw conclusions from the scene about like the story of what's going on, not necessarily as like a display piece, right?
100%.
Compared to, well, like for the winner, here's this one. I would say this one's one where it's a little bit kind of in between. Like, I mean, like you kind of get the sense of like what's going on here sort of as like a point in time, but it's not necessarily like the case. It's kind of more of just like kind of a vignette of these particular mobile suits, right? But so just to kind of elaborate on your point there for the original for the question of like a tip for modelers, I mean, you want to make something that's gonna stand out, but the other point too, I mean, just because I mean yours is a great example of the fact of how important just the basic modeling skills are for. I mean, like you could have a great idea that if you don't have the skills to pull it off, if you've got rough bits of paint, if you've got like visible seam lines, visible nub marks, things like that, I mean, like your scribing is not clean and things like that, if you fall short there, where like it's like you're saying there's kind of like a step process where like the first step is just like the initial image of it, you know, from 5 feet away, from 10 feet away, that may catch your attention. Like something like this, like for this piece too, would be one that would be like from a distance, be like, wow, that looks like pretty incredible. But then if you went up close and you started seeing like a bunch of nub marks and like decals out of line and things like that up close, then you know it would just drop off. Like the scoring would just fail immensely, right? So you kind of have to have that where, and that's probably an important thing to do, you know, like while you're in the process of, you know, like in the early stages of like designing out your build for it, where again, yours a bit kind of a unique situation for yours, but you may want to, you know, plan it out and then like actually physically step back away from it and look at it from far away and be like, is this something that's going to be eye-catching from a distance? And then going in, you know, like once you've got that, then go in and work on the rest. You kind of did it the other way around. But
no,
you know,
I think you mentioned really good points, and actually, like you made me think of something else too, which is really important, and it's like just the general concept of the more modifications and scratch building you do, the more difficult it is to make it look good, you know, like so for example, the more things you cut up, the more things you like seam together or the scratch build, right, the harder it is to make it look good, right? And so I would say like really gauge to like, not that you don't want to push yourself, like you do want to push yourself, but all too often I've seen people who are like, I'm going to scratch build this arm, I'm going to scratch build this shoulder, I'm going to scratch build like this whole joint, right? And then as they do it, and they're like, oh, and I custom painted it. But when you look at it, it's like, oh, you can totally tell it's like scratch built, right? Whereas if they just kept with the original arm and the original shoulder, it would have been much easier to make it just look more polished kind of thing, right? And so gauge like really like your skill level, right? Not that you always stay at the same skill level. You do want to push yourself a little bit, right? But sometimes if you become too ambitious to like start scratch building everything or start gluing everything over top of each other, the more you change, the more you modify, the harder it is to make it a nice final product, right? Especially when it comes to like when people are judging you for craftsmanship and painting, right? Because it kind of stacks on top of each other, right? So I would say like, again, like, keep it simple, right? Like if you know, like, okay, you know, you want to try out one skill, go for it, right? But I wouldn't go too ambitious and be like, oh well, I'm gonna build the whole lower body and like I'm gonna use like an exceed head and I'm gonna build the whole body out of it and make a massive Gundam, right? So that's another concept too, is like the more, just the idea, like the more you modify, the harder it is, the more work it's going to take to make it look polished and nice, right? And so
yeah. This, like, while we were kind of discussing that point, this one came to mind and kind of like really shows, why it did place in the top 3. I mean, aside from it just being like a rather large piece, just physically in the space. But I mean, this one, it came to mind while we were talking about that, because this is a perfect example of the kind of piece that, like, from a distance you would see and be like, wow, it's like really going to catch your eye. It's like something interesting. I mean, and then like, subjectively, it does have that kind of Bayformer look to it that some people may not appreciate. But once you go in and actually look, if all this painting and all the actual work here is like actually like really clean and well done, and like it takes a lot of skill to be able to do this. Where it's eye-catching, sure, but then once you actually look up close, like the modeling skill level is there, and it subjectively may not be for everyone, but you have to acknowledge the skill.
Appreciate that. 100%.
For me, like with this particular piece, not to get into like a critique session for all these, but the only thing that I kind of dislike more about this piece is actually the stuff that's in the foreground and background, aside from the main piece myself. But we'll save. Maybe we'll do a separate critique at a different time, talking about our personal pros and cons on different pieces. But anyway, so there's, I'm sure, a lot more we could talk about the pieces and the experiences, but I feel like that's a good amount. And like, I would recommend to anybody, because it's been a long time since we've really kind of, well, because of COVID, and then even after COVID, I feel like here, just like on my channel anyway, haven't really talked a whole lot like in depth about GBWC a lot since kind of before COVID. So if people are kind of like interested in this type of conversation about GBWC specifically, check out some older episodes. I think it's like Gunpla Talk, where we talked more about that in the past. And other past episodes with other winners as well. But thanks, Ryan.
Oh, thanks for having me, Zach.
And like I said, we've got a lot of cool stuff to look at in future episodes of Plamono Trend. Someone mentioned in the chat, I don't know if you saw that when we were talking about your acceptance speech, that you should have plugged Plamono Trend while you're up there.
Oh, I should have. Oh man. Oh,
I'm disappointed.
Maybe next time, if I am fortunate enough to have the opportunity again, I'll remember that.
You best believe that if I'm ever on that stage, I'm not going to pass up the opportunity.
Nice.
I'll be up there. I'll have a Zacharilius t-shirt, and a hat, Plamono Trend hat on.
I should have done that. Well, I don't have the merch, but I should have. Oh, that would have been such a good. Again, I wasn't expecting to be there, but
right. I understand, but anyway, congrats again. We'll talk some more about that, but a lot of cool stuff covered for today. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
And we'll let you guys know when the next episode of Plamono Trend will be. Ryan and I will be chatting some more about some other cool stuff. But check out Ryan's Instagram and Twitter. That's kind of the extent of it, right? If they want to check out a bunch of the photos that I pulled of taking a look at your kit, and if you guys want to like look back at Ryan's work, you can check there, of course.
Thank you.
Sound good? Yes.
Perfect.
Congrats again. Do you have the trophy with you? Did you bring it back with you, or they got to send it?
Yeah. Do you want to see it?
Yeah.
I'll be back.
I don't know why you wouldn't just have it there ready to show off anyway, but yes. He's probably got it on, to be fair, like on display somewhere. I would not just like have it sitting there collecting dust in my hobby room. You've got it on an actual display somewhere in your house, right? Not
actually, just on my coffee table.
Room. Oh, on your coffee
just on my coffee table. Yeah, this thing's like double the weight as the other one, and it's really big, I feel so bad because like I actually like chipped the paint a little bit, right over here and here, but it looks like realistic battle damage. or paint chip. But anyways, yeah, this is crazy. Can't believe it, man.
Nice.
That's crazy. But yeah.
So you're entering again this year, yes or no?
I don't know. I don't have an idea yet. And normally it takes a long time. Yeah. So I'm thinking I do want to make like a Zaku, like a variant, like not a variant, but like like a companion piece to the RX, right? So I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how that comes. But I have no idea yet. Like, yeah, we'll see. Yeah. How about you? How about you, man?
Yeah, I hope so. I hope so.
No pressure, man.
But I'll be sad, you know, just think of it. What if I manage to make something and it works out great and I end up getting selected and then you're not there? I mean, what am I going to do? So you kind of have to. I mean, like, but I mean, I guess you can wait and see if I'm actually able to get started on an entry or not. No. We'll see. Yeah, I hope so. But anyway.
Yeah. It is really fun. Yeah.
I think what I think might be a good strategy for me this year, rather than thinking like last year, I'm thinking like, okay, I have all this time, but like I want to finish these other projects first. I think what I'm gonna try to do is like I do have a couple of projects that like I need to finish like now, and then I think I want to just right after that, so like soon, maybe in like I don't know, in the next couple months, I'll start and like plan on just trying to work on a GBWC entry and just like and finish it, not worrying about like thinking, okay, like I have 6 months, but just do it like earlier. And then like if I end up finishing and I still have like 3 months, 4 months left after that, like it's fine.
That's a good, that's a good way.
But rather than thinking about it as like an amount of time that I have, just like put it early, just like put it soon in the queue.
Yes.
So that, you know, however long it ends up taking, it's not a big deal. So I don't know. That's kind of what I'm thinking about at the moment. But
that's a good way to go about it.
We'll talk about it more later.
Yeah. It's really funny. Like just reading the chat about like Zaku unloading is really funny. One of my friends was like, "Hey Ryan, next year you should just like remove all the grid marks on your RX-78 and just call your entry loaded." And then just resubmit the entire thing and be like, loaded.
Change the pose slightly, or
color the base differently, maybe like a darker gray or something.
Your little Amuro figure fully painted up.
Yeah, exactly, fully loaded. That'll be so funny. Oh man,
that would be good. Anyway.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you, Ryan. Thanks everybody for hanging out in the chat.
Thanks, guys.
If you have further questions about that, you know, reach out to Ryan, send him a message or something on social media, talk to him about his work. But we'll have Ryan back here on the channel pretty soon for some more Plan Mono Trend goodness. And till then, see you guys later.
See you guys.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.